is standing by now with the State Street Investment CEO Yi-Shin Hong, who just wrapped her panel. Danny.
Ronnie, thank you so much. That's right. I am here with the State Street Investment Management CEO, Yi-Shin Hong. Really excited for this conversation. Yi-Shin, thank you so much for joining, and great to see your panel earlier this morning, too.
It's great to be here with you, Danny.
So this is your third year as CEO of State Street, one of the oldest banks in America, a storied institution, and it's been, let's call it a volatile business environment for 2025. We're talking just after a government shutdown, policy changes coming thick and fast. How do you judge 2025 so far?
Well, it has been a very dynamic year, let's say. But at the same time, we feel very good about the U.S. economy. Our base case is for a soft landing. We think that the Fed is making the right moves by starting with a 25 basis point cut. We're looking for another 50 basis points this year, 50 basis points first half of next year. Corporate earnings are incredibly strong. Right, the EPS estimates are supposed to be 11% this year, 13% next year. And so despite a lot of action and policy making, at the same time, we feel like the fundamentals are actually quite strong.
How does some of it change how you run State Street specifically? And part of what I think about is talent, for example. Changes to H-1B visas, tensions at financial and academic institutions in Boston where you're based. Has that changed at all, how you think about bringing talent into the bank?
Well, look, we're examining all of those and thinking about the implications for our long-term talent strategy. What's important to keep in mind is State Street is a global firm. State Street Investment Management is also. We're in 30 locations around the world, 12 of which we manage money out of. And so we have so many locations in which we can attract talent.
Does it change at all how and what geographies you want to attract talent? Are you looking, for example, expanding more abroad versus the U.S.?
We're looking everywhere in all major markets. Of course, we see tremendous growth as you think about the Asia-Pacific region, Middle East. But there's a lot of dynamics in every market, whether there's increased pension consolidation that we see in the UK, Ireland, the Netherlands, and then the tremendous growth and just wealth. And the ways in which individual investors are accessing investments is evolving by virtue of technology and personalization and scale and all of that. So there's so many opportunities. At the same time, we can focus on some of the challenges in the marketplace, but I tend to look at these longer term trends and see a real role for us as a global, very significant firm being able to bring insights to investors.
State Street always investing in technology, and of course we're in the middle of a technological revolution, you could call it. How are you thinking about not just AI as an investment, but implementing AI within State Street?
There's so much promise across AI, just in automating basic tasks, but leveraging tremendous amount of data that we have. State Street is the second largest custodian bank in the world, and so a good 10 to 15% of all transactions we see. So there's enormous information that we gather that we can then turn into insights, and that's one of the wonderful applications of AI and machine learning.
Yeah, HSBC says that they've cracked the nut of quantum computing. Is that something that State Street's looking at using?
We are definitely looking at it, but I would say a lot of this is still early days, and it will play out over time. And to your point, investors are increasingly asking us about the implications of quantum computing, the digital currency environment, AI, blockchain. Unfortunately, there are a number of ways that investors can play those themes today.
Do you think ultimately it leads to just a more productive workforce, or does it also lead to a slimmer workforce too?
I think the evolution of roles will change. First and foremost, we really want our people focused on the areas they add most value and take out, those activities that tend to be more manual, more administrative. And if we can leverage technology, I think that's all the better. But also, I think from the investing standpoint, there's more insights to be gained. And then clearly, as we're interacting with more and more investors and understand what's on their minds, we can be in a better position to tailor solutions for them.
One of the other evolutions is the inclusion of private assets, private capital, for more wealth and retail-oriented investors. You've really been at the forefront with this. You've launched your second ETF with Apollo. What's next?
We're really excited about this arena. We see ETFs as sort of the vehicle of choice around the world. This year is likely to be another record year in terms of ETF flows. And for us, because we're such a significant ETF player, we're in a good position to partner with the likes of Apollo and Blackstone and Bridgewater to bring these great strategies that institutional investors have had access to for a long time and make that available to everyday investors. So we're constantly looking for what are those types of innovative investment exposures we can deliver.
And for the most part, it really has centered around credit. Maybe it's a little bit more liquid. Do you think all types of private capital make sense in an ETF wrapper? For example, real estate, private equity, VC, does all of that make sense? Or do you think it will remain just being credit that will fit the ETF wrapper?
Yeah, look, I mean, ETFs, it's important that there's underlying liquidity. And we've seen that develop in the fixed income market. With our ETF, Apollo is providing firm bids. We're seeing interest from the street. So we want to make sure that that exists because that's critical. The nice part about the ETF structure, though, is that 90% of the liquidity is typically in the secondary market. So you're not solely reliant on the underlying to provide that liquidity. And so I think we have to be very careful as we evolve. And then ultimately there's this promise of tokenization, right? That could also be another way in which some of these more illiquid assets can then be available to people.
There has been this desire for these private assets, and part of it is just because there are less public companies. We have half the amount of publicly listed companies that we did in the late 90s. Other changes too, companies being taken private. We had EA last week, which was massive. At the same time, you have a administration that maybe will allow companies to report just twice a year instead of quarterly. One could view it as a move for these public markets to be less transparent. Obviously, State Street, you're very much so in these public markets. Do you think that is an issue? Is this a world moving where investment just looks less transparent as it once did?
We think it's actually going in the other direction because we see a lot of private markets firms really bringing different types of vehicles. You talked about what we are doing. We're also doing this in the retirement arena. We're the first to introduce private markets within our target date fund series. All of that requires sort of increased transparency, increased information. And with that, we think markets will begin to develop around sort of this private market space, even if the number of public companies doesn't grow dramatically.
All right, Ishan, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining this morning.
Thank you,
Fantastic to see you. And Bonnie, that is, of course, Ishan Hung of State Street. Lots of changes at the firm, whether it be diving into private market ETFs or looking at how AI is changing the future of finance.
Absolutely, Danny. Fantastic interview, and we'll be looking forward to more of those later from you. That is Danny Berger there in London, and you can continue following the panels at Bloomberg's Women, Money and Power event in London by typing LiveGo on your terminals. Now to other top stories.